Ma'am, I need to verify your status now.
I'm a U.S. citizen and a licensed attorney. You have no grounds to detain me.
The Starbucks on Westthamer Road was doing its usual Saturday afternoon rush when it happened. October 26th, 2:32 p.m. The kind of Dallas autumn that felt like summer hadn't gotten the message yet. Warm sun, clear sky, the smell of roasted coffee drifting through open drive-through windows. Victoria Morrison had pulled into the lot for a quick stop after running errands with her son. Still in weekend clothes, green cardigan, dark top, silver necklace catching the afternoon light. Her boy Marcus was in his orange puffer vest, cake pop in hand, asking if they could go to the park after. Just another Saturday. Except ICE officer Tanner Cropley was already stepping out of a patrol vehicle she hadn't noticed idling 2 spaces behind her. His body camera was already rolling. Timestamp BWC 202-410-26, 14:32:15, recording what would become the most expensive 4 minutes in Dallas law enforcement history. If you're ready to watch a $28.5 million verdict get built brick by brick from a parking lot, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. And if this is your first time here, subscribe right now, because tomorrow's story involves a cop who threatened the wrong retired judge, and the consequences were immediate. Let me know in the comments what stood out to you most. Cropley moved without announcing himself. No verbal identification, no command, no warning, just the sound of boots on asphalt closing distance fast. Victoria was loading the last of her bags into the open trunk, Starbucks cup balanced in one hand, her keys in the other, when something made her turn. 17 years of practicing civil rights law, of reading body language in depositions and hostile cross-examinations, had sharpened her instincts into something close to a sixth sense. She read the forward lane, the set jaw, the right hand already reaching. She had just enough time to register ice patches on his vest, to start turning her body away from the open trunk, to begin to say something, before Cropley's full weight hit her from behind and the asphalt came up fast. Marcus's cake pop hit the ground the same moment his mother did. Crack Victoria heard wasn't the pavement. She knew it immediately, the way the body knows before the brain catches up. 2 ribs left side. The pain arrived a half second later, white and breathtaking. Cropley's knee pressed into her back, his radio crackled. Victoria kept her face turned sideways against the asphalt, able to see her son's orange sneakers, completely frozen, and made herself speak through the pain, slowly, clearly, for every microphone and every camera she knew were recording. "I am an attorney. I am not resisting. I am injured. My son is standing right there." Cropley's voice came over her head, flat and certain, aimed at his radio. Uncooperative subject, requesting backup. Uncooperative, the word landed harder than the pavement had. Inside the Starbucks, a barista had stopped mid-order and pressed her phone against the glass. A man unloading his trunk 2 rows over had his camera up before the handcuffs clicked. A woman walking toward the entrance reversed direction entirely, recording as she backed away. The body camera on Cropley's chest kept rolling, indifferent and precise, capturing a black woman lying still on sun-warmed Dallas asphalt with her hands visible and her son screaming, while an officer filed a report calling her a threat. "Mama," Marcus's voice was high and terrified, the park question forgotten entirely. "I'm right here, baby." Victoria kept her voice steady even as her ribs made every breath a negotiation. "Stay exactly where you are, don't move toward me." 17 years of practicing law, of staying composed while opposing counsel lied, while judges dismissed her motions, while juries looked past her to the men at the other table, had taught her one foundational truth about moments like this. Panic was the enemy, documentation was the weapon. Every second of pain, every word Cropley spoke, every badge number visible on the vest above her, every bystander now recording from 4 separate angles, all of it was evidence, all of it was a case. She memorized the timestamp she'd seen on his camera before the tackle, 14:32:15. She noted the time the handcuffs closed, 14:32:41. She felt both ribs and filed that away too, with the cold efficiency of a woman who had spent nearly 2 decades building arguments from fragments and turning oversight into verdicts. Cropley hadn't tackled a civilian in a Starbucks parking lot. He had tackled the wrong attorney, and his own body camera had recorded every second of it. Marcus stood frozen in his orange vest, cake pop on the pavement beside him, watching a man in a uniform put handcuffs on his mother. His face held the specific confusion of a child whose world has just rearranged itself without explanation. A Starbucks employee pushed through the side door and moved toward him, her voice gentle, her hands open. Victoria was lifted to her feet. She did not stumble. She did not cry. She stood at her full height, wrists cuffed behind her, and spoke to Cropley's body camera as clearly as she would address a federal judge. "My name is Victoria Morrison. I am a licensed attorney, Dallas Bar Association, license number 48227. I have practiced civil rights law for 17 years. I am a United States citizen, born in Dallas, Texas. I am injured. I have not resisted at any point. There is no probable cause for this arrest. This is being recorded by at least 4 civilian devices, in addition to your body camera, and I intend to obtain copies of every frame of footage before close of business Monday. Cropley said nothing. He walked her toward the patrol vehicle, one hand on her arm, navigating around Marcus's abandoned cake pop like it wasn't there. The Starbucks employee had her arms around Marcus now. The barista was still at the window. The man with the camera was still recording. The woman who'd been walking toward the entrance had stopped entirely and was reading Cropley's batch number aloud into her phone, 7714, making sure her microphone caught it. Victoria catalogued it all. The time, the badge, the absence of any stated probable cause, the dismissal of her identification without a single attempt at verification, the 4 civilian cameras, her son's face turned toward her as the patrol car door opened, looking for something in her expression that would tell him this was going to be okay. She gave it to him, a steady look, a single nod. Then the door closed and the vehicle pulled out of the lot, leaving Marcus with a stranger, leaving her Starbucks bag on the pavement beside the open trunk, leaving her SUV parked with the keys still in her hand when Cropley grabbed her, now bagged as evidence, sitting on warm Dallas asphalt. In the front seat, Cropley was already on the radio. His voice was casual, routine. The voice of a man who believed the paperwork would take care of the rest. Victoria sat in the back seat, breathing carefully around the ribs, and began to build her case. Victoria Morrison had not planned to change the course of Dallas law enforcement history on a Saturday afternoon. She had planned to get a coffee, let Marcus pick out a cake pop, and make it to the park before the afternoon heat peaked. That was the entire agenda. She was 44 years old, 17 years into a civil rights practice that opposing counsel had learned to dread. Not because she was loud, because she was precise. The kind of attorney who arrived at depositions with questions that had already anticipated the answers, who built cases the way a surgeon builds an incision, deliberate, economical, designed to reach exactly what needed to be reached. The Dallas Bar Association had recognized her twice. Her clients called her the last phone call they ever needed to make. On this particular Saturday, she was wearing a green cardigan and carrying a Starbucks bag, her silver necklace catching the October sun as she moved between the passenger door and the open trunk. Marcus was beside her in his orange puffer vest, cake pop already unwrapped, mid-sentence about whether the park would still have the good swings available. She wasn't watching the parking lot, she had no reason to. Tanner Cropley covered the distance from his patrol vehicle in 11 steps. No announcement, no identification, no command or question or single spoken word to indicate his presence or intention. Just boots on asphalt, closing fast, and then hands, both of them, grabbing from behind with the full momentum of a man who had already decided what was happening before he left his vehicle. Victoria had time to begin turning, just barely. Her body hit the pavement at 14:32:19. 4 seconds elapsed between Cropley's first contact and the ground. 4 seconds in which she had done nothing, loaded no weapon, made no threat, spoken no word, moved no hand toward him. Marcus's cake pop hit the asphalt. Then her son started screaming. The pavement was warm from the afternoon sun. That was the detail that stayed with her afterward, the specific warmth of Dallas asphalt against her cheek, while the pain arrived in waves she had to breathe around. She heard the crack before she felt it. A sharp, intimate sound, the kind that originates inside the body and radiates outward. 2 ribs, left side. The weight of Cropley's knee settled between her shoulder blades a half-second later, pinning her flat, and Victoria Morrison did the thing that 17 years of civil rights practice had trained her to do in the worst moments of the worst days. She controlled her breathing, she controlled her voice, she made herself speak. "I am an attorney, I am not resisting, I am injured, my son is standing right there." Each sentence came out measured, deliberate, aimed at the body camera she could see in her peripheral vision, the red recording light blinking with the indifferent consistency of a metronome. She was not speaking to Cropley. She understood already that speaking to Cropley was not the point. She was speaking to the record. Cropley's radio crackled as he reached for her wrists. His voice was flat, unhurried, the tone of a man filling out a form, uncooperative subject. His thumb pressed the cuff mechanism and the metal closed. Victoria had not moved toward him once. The body camera recorded all of it, the timestamp running in the corner of the frame, her hands visible and open against the asphalt, her stillness, the knee on her back, The cuffs applied to a woman who had offered no resistance, no threat, nothing beyond the act of loading groceries into an open trunk on a Saturday afternoon. Cropley's own equipment recorded the gap between his report and reality with the precision of a document notarized in real time. Inside the Starbucks, a barista had her phone pressed flat against the window glass. Marcus stood 3 feet away, frozen, his sneakers at the edge of Victoria's field of vision, not moving, not speaking anymore, just watching his mother on the ground, trying to understand something no child should have to understand. The paramedics arrived at 14:41, 9 minutes after the timestamp on Cropley's body camera. Victoria noted it with the same quiet precision she noted everything else, the name on the first paramedic's badge, the exact phrasing of his initial assessment, the moment Cropley stepped back and let the medical team through with the reluctant body language of a man whose certainty had begun to develop small cracks. The injury was too visible to argue with. 2 fractured ribs don't negotiate with paperwork. They took her to Presbyterian Dallas before processing, the gurney wheels clicking across the ER bay floor while Victoria lay still and continued building. The attending physician, a compact woman named Dr. Reyes who moved with the efficiency of someone perpetually behind schedule, ordered imaging without being asked twice. The x-rays confirmed what Victoria's body had already told her. 2 fractures left side 3rd and 4th ribs, documented, photographed. Time-stamped in the hospital system at 15:22. Fractures don't lie. That was the phrase that settled into Victoria's mind as she studied the ceiling of the examination room. Whatever Cropley's report said, whatever language his supervisor chose to arrange around the word uncooperative, the fractures existed in a system with their own timestamp, their own chain of custody, their own permanent record that no internal memo could touch. Marcus rode in a separate vehicle with a female officer named Chen who tried to be kind, and largely succeeded. Victoria found out later that Chen had bought him a second cake pop from a gas station en route. She filed that detail away too, not as evidence, but as the one moment of grace in an otherwise graceless afternoon. Before Dr. Reyes left the examination room, Victoria asked for copies of all imaging, all intake notes, all documentation generated during her visit. The doctor paused, reading something in Victoria's expression that went beyond standard patient protocol. She printed everything without being asked twice. 17 years of building cases from fragments had taught Victoria one foundational discipline. The case that wins in a courtroom is assembled in the first hours, before memory softens and paperwork gets managed. This one had started the moment her ribs met Dallas asphalt. She had not stopped building it since. The processing facility smelled of fluorescent lighting and old coffee. That particular institutional combination, stale air humming overhead tubes, the low percussion of bureaucracy moving at its own pace, was familiar enough to Victoria that it almost steadied her. She had visited facilities like this with clients for 17 years. She knew how they breathed. They seated her in a corridor outside the clearance office at 17:14, her medical discharge paperwork in a manila envelope on her lap, her ribs wrapped and protesting every shallow breath. The hallway was the kind of unremarkable space that institutions rely on, a place where people wait without being watched, where conversations happen at half volume because nobody important is ever assumed to be listening. 2 officers stood near the far end of the corridor, maybe 12 feet away. One was older, a supervisor's insignia visible on his collar, name tag reading Harwell. The other was younger, holding a clipboard with the posture of someone receiving instruction. Harwell's voice was low, unhurried, textured with the casual authority of a man explaining something obvious to someone who should already understand it. Cropley's report says uncooperative, keep the paperwork clean. 6 words, delivered in the tone of a lunch order. The younger officer nodded once, a single, practiced nod, the kind that meant understood, not just heard. Victoria did not move, did not look up, did not allow a single shift in her expression to signal that she had registered anything at all. She sat with her manila envelope and her fractured ribs, and fixed her eyes on the middle distance while her mind worked with the focused silence of a closing argument being assembled in real time. Harwell's full name from the name tag, the time on the hallway clock, 17:19, the colleague's face, approximate age, the clipboard in his left hand, the exact 6 words in their exact sequence, the tone, the nod. She had walked into that hallway with a use of force case. She was leaving it with something considerably larger. This was no longer about what Cropley had done in a parking lot. This was about what the institution did afterward, the machinery that closed around misconduct and called the result clean paperwork. Victoria had spent 17 years learning to dismantle exactly that machinery. She had just been handed the blueprint. They released her at 1947. She walked out into a Dallas evening that had finally conceded to autumn. the air cooled to something reasonable, the sky a deep petroleum blue above the facility's perimeter lighting. Her mother was waiting at the curb with Marcus already asleep in his car seat, his orange vest still on, one shoe half off. Victoria stood beside the car for a moment before getting in, breathing carefully, cataloguing the pain, filing it. At the kitchen table that night, while the house settled into silence and Marcus slept with every light in his room burning, Victoria worked. The medical records from Presbyterian Dallas, organized chronologically, Dr. Reyes' imaging notes, the discharge summary with its precise clinical language describing fractures that predated any processing paperwork by hours. Badge numbers Cropley 7714, Harwell's pulled from her memory of the name tag and confirmed against the facility's public directory. The hallway conversation transcribed word for word, time-stamped, witnessed by no one except the only person in that corridor who understood exactly what she was hearing. She found the bystander footage before 10 o'clock, 4 separate angles already circulating, already gathering the particular momentum of something the internet recognizes as real. She downloaded every version, backed each one to her office server, her personal cloud, and a physical drive she locked in her desk drawer before midnight. Evidence had a way of disappearing when institutions felt threatened. These copies would not. She called Marcus Webb on Monday morning. His reputation in civil rights litigation was the kind built over decades of cases that reshaped policy rather than simply resolving disputes. He reviewed her documentation in a single sitting, methodical and quiet, and said almost nothing until he reached the body camera timestamp synced against Cropley's written incident report. The report stated that Victoria Morrison had lunged toward the officer. The timestamp showed 1.3 seconds between first contact and impact. The footage showed her standing still. Webb's voice went quiet in the way that meant something had shifted. He didn't just assault you, he committed perjury on a federal document. Victoria had known it since the parking lot. Now they had the architecture, built entirely from materials Cropley and Harwell had provided themselves, laid out on her kitchen table in the particular order that turned facts into verdicts. The first offer arrived 11 days after the incident. $180,000 and a non-disclosure agreement, delivered in the careful language of attorneys who had done this before, structured to feel generous, designed to disappear. Victoria read it at her desk on a Tuesday morning, set it down, and dictated her response to her assistant in a single sentence. Declined. The second offer came 3 weeks later. $750,000, same confidentiality clause, slightly warmer cover letter. The defense had seen the bystander footage by then. They knew what the body camera showed. The number reflected that knowledge without quite admitting it. Victoria's response took less time than the first. Declined. The third offer was different in construction if not in intention. $2.1 million, no confidentiality requirement, accompanied by a public apology that Webb placed on Victoria's desk with a look that required no commentary. She read it once slowly, with the attention she gave every document that was trying to accomplish something other than what it appeared to be accomplishing. The apology was 4 paragraphs of carefully assembled language that expressed regret for Victoria's experience without attributing that experience to any specific action by any specific person. It admitted nothing. It changed nothing. It was designed to close a file. She set it down 3 minutes past, declined. Each rejection landed differently at the defense table, and discovery reflected the escalating discomfort. Webb's document requests were surgical, Cropley's complete use of force history, internal supervision records, departmental performance reviews. What came back was more than the defense had wanted to produce. 6 prior complaints against Cropley. 6, not one had resulted in formal discipline. The paperwork on each had been, in the language Victoria now understood precisely, kept clean. Deeper in the production, internal memos surfaced recommending what the documents called more assertive engagement protocols in high-traffic enforcement corridors. Corridors identified by zip code. Zip codes that mapped, with the precision of intention rather than coincidence, onto Dallas's predominantly Black and Latino neighborhoods. The cover-up wasn't Harwell protecting one officer in one hallway. It was policy dressed in euphemism, documented in the defense's own files. Produced under court order into the hands of the attorney, they had been hopping would take the money and go away. The Dallas federal courthouse stood pale and certain under a March sky that couldn't decide between winter and spring. 5 months since the Starbucks parking lot. 5 months of documentation and depositions, and a defense team that had spent considerable resources trying to contain something that had never been containable, because the containment had failed the moment Cropley switched his body camera on. Webb opened without preamble. 2 screens, side by side, visible to every member of the jury. On the left, Cropley's written incident report. On the right, the body camera footage, time-stamped, synced to the second. He let them run together and said almost nothing. He didn't need to. The discrepancies landed with the self-evident weight of facts that required no interpretation, only observation. Cropley took the stand on day 2. His testimony was composed, coached, delivered in the measured cadence of a man who had prepared for this. He stated that Victoria Morrison had made a sudden movement toward him, that he had responded to a perceived threat, that his actions had followed standard engagement protocol. His attorney nodded incrementally from the defense table. Webb cross-examined with a single exhibit, the timestamp, 1.3 seconds between Cropley's first contact and Victoria hitting the pavement. He asked Cropley, quietly, to explain how a reaction to a sudden movement could occur in 1.3 seconds when the footage showed no movement at all. Cropley's composure developed the same small cracks Victoria had observed in the parking lot. He had no answer that the screens beside him would corroborate. Victoria testified on day 4. She described her practice, her 17 years, the specific texture of a Saturday afternoon that had begun with a cake pop and a question about park swings. She described the warmth of the asphalt, the crack she heard before she felt it, Marcus's frozen sneakers at the edge of her vision. Then she described a corridor, a clock reading 1719, a name tag reading Harwell, and 6 words delivered in the casual tone of institutional routine. "Keep the paperwork clean." The courtroom went still in the particular way that happens when a jury understands that what they are hearing is not allegation, but architecture, the load-bearing structure of a cover-up, spoken aloud by the only witness who had been paying close enough attention to matter. The jury began deliberating on a Thursday. Victoria took Marcus to the park that same afternoon, the one with the good swings, the errand they had never completed in October. She pushed him and he pumped his legs and asked her if she thought the jury would be nice people, and she told him that she thought they were paying very close attention, which was the most important thing. They stayed until the light changed. 4 days, each morning the park, deliberate and ordinary, reclaiming the version of Saturday that Cropley had interrupted. Each afternoon, Webb's office, working through exhibits with the focused calm of people who had done everything that could be done and were now simply waiting for the weight of the evidence to complete its work. Each evening, her mother's voice on the phone, Dallas bedrock, the particular steadiness of a woman who had watched her daughter build something formidable from nothing and was not surprised by any of it. The word came on Monday. The courtroom filled again with the specific energy of a verdict. Anticipation pulled tight, the gallery leaning forward, the defense table arranged with the careful stillness of people preparing for impact. Victoria sat beside Webb with her hands folded on the table and her expression composed in the way she had trained herself to remain composed in every room where the stakes were highest. The foreperson rose: excessive force, guilty; unlawful seizure, guilty; racial profiling, guilty; civil rights violation, guilty; institutional cover-up, guilty; punitive damages assessed by name against Tanner Cropley and Supervising Officer Dale Harwell; total award $28.5 million, unanimous on all counts. The courtroom erupted, the gallery rose. Somewhere behind her, someone said her name like a prayer. Cropley's face went the color of the courthouse walls. Victoria remained still, hands folded, eyes forward, her expression carrying something that was not triumph and not relief but the particular quiet of a woman who had known, since 19 on an October afternoon, exactly how this would end if she simply refused to let it be buried. Outside, the press assembled on the courthouse steps in the pale March light. She gave them one statement. "My son watched a man in a uniform knock his mother to the ground. This verdict tells him that was wrong. That's all I needed it to say." Cropley's termination came through before the week was out. Harwell's resignation followed 2 days later, delivered in the language of men who understand that the alternative is worse. The Department of Justice announced a formal audit of ICE use of force protocols across the Dallas, Fort Worth region within the month, and expanded it nationally before the audit team had finished its first site visit. The enforcement corridor memos had traveled further than the defense had anticipated. Documents had a way of doing that once they entered the public record. Morrison Legal opened the following September, 6 months after the verdict, in a building on the east side of Dallas that sat 3 blocks from 2 of the zip codes on those internal maps. Victoria hired deliberately young attorneys from the neighborhoods the memos had labeled high-traffic corridors, paralegals who understood systemic targeting from the inside of it rather than the outside, investigators who knew which communities had stopped filing complaints because filing had never changed anything. She built the firm the way she built cases, from the ground up with precision for the long term. The work accumulated: use of force violations, unlawful detentions, credentials dismissed by officers who had made their decisions before asking a single question. Each file a family a version of a Saturday that had gone wrong in a parking lot, while the rest of the world continued its ordinary rhythm around them. Marcus, older now, drew her a picture for her office wall. A woman in a green cardigan, standing straight, her son beside her, a courtroom sketched in the background in the particular confident lines of a child who has processed something difficult and arrived on the other side of it with understanding. Victoria framed it beside her bar certificate, where it remained. She mentored, she litigated, she won. And on ordinary Saturdays, she stopped for coffee without incident, because she had fought in public on the record. Until incident carried consequences that made the next officer pause before making a decision he couldn't take back. The line held, the work continued. The ground, hard won and documented, did not move.